Today, I'm going to tell you a story that happened a long time ago to a young student at Berkeley University. The story is well known around the world, and I think you should know it as well. Our story begins in 1914, when little George was born to Jewish parents. His father Tobias was a mathematician and linguist, as well as his mother Anne. He was just an ordinary child, but the only thing he was passionate about was math. By the time he reached high school, he was already fascinated by geometry, and his interest was nurtured by his father, challenging him with complicated problems and tasks. Well, right now, we came to the story that can change the whole life. Our story begins when a young college student, George Danzig, was studying hard in an upper-level math course, doubting that he could ever pass the test. As a student at the University of California, George took his studies very seriously and often stayed up late at night. On the night before the final, he studied so long that he overslept the morning of the test. Just imagine a young student, like many of us, was running along the corridor looking for the classroom, but he was 20 minutes late for his class. Of course, he missed the beginning of the lesson. Trying to be super quiet, he silently took his place and was figuring out what he just missed. He looked at the blackboard and saw 3 equations. It must be the home task for the next time, he thought. He silently wrote down all 3 equations. 2 of those were quite simple, but the last one required more time and efforts. He came home and spent a couple of days and even nights thinking about the solution for the 3rd task. Finally, he got the solution and was ready to pass it to the professor. He left his test paper on the professor's desk. The next Sunday, in the early morning, somebody rang at the door. George and his wife Anne were not expecting any guests. Wonder who that was? It was our professor. "Do you realize what you did on the test today?" he shouted at the student. "Oh no," thought the student. "I must not have gotten the tasks right after all." "You were only supposed to do the first 2, the professor explained. "The last one was an example of an equation that mathematicians in the whole world have been trying to solve with no success. The last one was the unsolvable math problem, and no one knew how to solve it. I discussed it with the class just before starting the test, and you just solved it." Though George didn't know that the problems were unsolvable, and he missed the beginning of the class when the professor explained the story behind this equation. It's difficult to describe what George was feeling at the moment, but he was extremely surprised by the professor's words. In 1975, George Danzig was awarded the National Medal of Science by President Gerald Ford. If George had known that the problems were not homework, but were in fact 2 famous unsolved problems in statistics, he would not have thought positively, would have become discouraged, and would never have solved them. So maybe nobody would have known George Danzig if he hadn't been late for the class in 1939. The moral of the story is that when people are free to pursue goals, unfettered by presumed limitations on what they can accomplish, they may manage some extraordinary feats through the combined application of native talent and hard work. You can do anything if you don't persuade yourself that it's impossible. Even if nobody has done it before you, just imagine how much you can achieve thinking positively.